Perhaps we need some outside universal threat. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Here's the thing, it's not our world.
None of this is real?
Nope.
So you're just passing
We don't
through.
matter. We don't matter.
Oh, wow.
That's the good news.
Oh!
Should I ask who you made the bargain with? with the chief commander. On this earth? And this earth, and then in a world we can't see.
So let's fast forward to 96. In 96, I was working for a publishing company in San Diego, and I went to lunch with one of my fellow employees, and he told me at lunch that his father-in-law had worked at Area 51 and been a cryptographer for the Army, and he had also been recruited by the CIA. So I said, boy, we got to talk to him. But he didn't want to talk. This is in 96. But I realized that this was too important and that his life was threatened, his family was threatened. Back to the same thing. They're threatening people. We'll get into why I think it's happening. I think I have the Rosetta Stone of this subject. And the son-in-law of my friend, I have in the book a code name for him, but he said that he would work with me, and so I called Linda Moulton Howe. She was in Philadelphia at the time, and she went to who I'm now calling Anonymous. She calls him Cooper, Stein. He has many different code names, and went and stayed at his home for 3 days and audio taped him. There's 11 90-minute tapes that she taped of him, and she put it up on her site. And so, and that's the last time, because Anonymous asked her for her not to contact him anymore, ever again, after, I think it was June of 96. So she actually went on Coast to Coast and played some of that audio with Art Bell. I think it's archived. And Art Bell is blown away. He's saying, Linda, this is the biggest story ever. But I pursued this for over 15 years with the family. And in 2010, his final secrecy oath expired. So I was at lunch with the family, Christmas lunch, in 2010, and they said, finally, you can go public with it. So in 2010 till today, I put together this book, and it's just called Anonymous. And it's basically Linda Moulton Howe's interview, but I went through every page of it and made certain changes with Anonymous that he demanded be changed. That's a long story why that is, but he wrote out his memoirs. I have his handwritten memoirs. He doesn't own a computer. He's not into anything technical that way. He's good at cryptography, but that's another story. So that's what the book is, annotated and enhanced by my working with his family. It's an absolutely true story. My book right now, which is #1 on Amazon, Alien Disclosure at Area 51, I have, in the appendix, I've added the current members of Majestic. So I've named 2 of them, Admiral McConnell and Dick Cheney. I'll name a 3rd one, Greenspan. Now, naturally everybody says, how do you know it's Greenspan? I'll just give you a little vignette of something that I learned along the way. The people in the Black Ops, I mean, they gossip. You know, people in the Secret Service gossip about Bill Clinton, what he's doing. I mean, that's what they do. You know, they're just people talking about things. And so back, I don't know, it was 6 or 7 years ago, Greenspan, in case you don't know it, is married to Andrea Mitchell, NBC, about 20-some years his junior. So Dan Burrish was telling me that the people in the Black Ops were kidding around about that Greenspan and his wife were in the hot tub and he threw his back out. Now that's just me talking to somebody in the black world. Then on TV the next day I see Greenspan in a wheelchair. Now, something's, that's just a little vignette. But I've told Linda Moulton Howe, I told Stanton Friedman, go try and talk to McConnell. Nobody will do it because everybody has their books, their videos, whatever their shtick is, they want to promote that. They don't, you know, I'm hoping that this will open the door to some other people. Now, the other one that you need to know about is about Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger knows all about this. He has his own, all of these people on Majestic have their own apartments, one-bedroom apartments at Area 51 S4. I have drawings of it. And so if there was a full court press by some serious journalists, then somebody is going to crack the code. And I think the one that's most logical is Admiral McConnell, because someone told me that someone had asked him about Dr. Dan Burrish if he knew him, and he just smiled and walked away. So that's neither confirmed nor denied. That to me is an admission. McConnell felt that Dr. Dan Burrish, and I've seen his IQ. He has 199 IQ. I've seen it by the top Army psychiatrists. Now, Kissinger, I think, is about 90-some years old, 92 or whatever. Well, part of this whole program, which we can get into, depending on how much time and so forth, at Area 51 S4 is genetic manipulation, both on the extraterrestrial and on humans. Now, I surmise, in my humble, informed opinion, that Kissinger has been enhanced. I mean, we know about hybrids, we know different things. Wouldn't surprise me one bit if he lives to be 100 and something. Kissinger, you know, his background, but I need to explain something. When Anonymous was at Area 51 S4, Eisenhower and Vice President Nixon sent Anonymous and his boss, I call him Jeffrey Wright, code name, to Area 51 to find out what's going on there. So that's what he did. He flew there on Air Force One in 1958, and there was a Air Force colonel there who had to be CIA. John Lear told me there's no just straight Air Force there, they're all CIA. They may wear whatever uniform they want. And by the way, Anonymous says on my camera that the CIA has a card. They can enter any building in the government. Swish that card, they can go into Fort Knox.
After about 6 weeks, my security clearance came through, and I got my CIA card. It was an ID card, like a credit card, where I could just go up to the door and slice it, walk right in.
In the Black Ops world, there's a whole esoteric group of people that are talking to channelers, that are out there conjuring all kinds of spirits. And it's an active part of what the Black Ops do. What do they do all day? They talk to spirits, they start wars, stop wars, do things with the economy, all for some original goal. And this is where we get to what I'm calling the Rosetta Stone of ufology. Why is it that literally hundreds of people have been tortured, murdered, or disastrous things happen to them. What could be behind this? 1949, James Forrestal, the first Secretary of Defense. This is 49. This is, 2 years after Roswell. What could have been known 2 years after Roswell to take him out? Well, what I think is that there is a secret government. Richard Dolan calls it the breakaway. I call it the fifth column. Why do I call it that? Because what Dan Burish says to me on camera, it's in my videos, that the J-Rod person, the being that was at Area 51 S4 for over 50 years, was called the ambassador. So, as kind of a joke, I called them names too. They called him Stumpy and Bright Eyes, making fun of this being from another star system. So if he's telling our secret government all of these secrets, then there's some kind of communication with these other dimensions. And Dan Burish, being such an intelligence person, was tuned in to this J-Rod person because the J-Rod was on a ship that Dan Burish was abducted into when he was 9 years old at Mayberry Park in Lakewood, California. So they had a communication going on. And part of what Dan Burish's job was to take tissue samples from this being because he was suffering from a neuropathy disease. And Dan Burish, microbiologist, would take the tissue samples with a special gun, send it up to the biologists, the cultural people upstairs, change the genome, send it back down through a special tube so there wouldn't be any contamination, reinsert it into the J-Rod. And they didn't cure the neuropathy disease, but they did improve it. And it's interesting that Bob Wood is sitting in front of me right now because he's written a great book called Alien Viruses. Now, why is it, one of the reasons that the Black Ops have kept this a secret all these years is because some of these beings are toxic. If you handle or get near them, you can die. Now, these Black Ops can't come to the general public and say, well, sorry, folks, some of these people are dangerous. And when I've given a few talks, I mentioned your book. In fact, I have it in one of my videos, Bob. And I mentioned that Dr. Roger Lear and I went to Virginia, and there was this creature down there. There was 4 of them that were captured by the local firemen, then turned over to the Army. And those creatures are big eyes, protuberances on the head, sort of a reddish complexion. And so Roger Lear and I went down there in the mid-90s to try and interview this orthopedic surgeon that had operated on this being. The being in Varginha, Brazil, and John Mack went down there also earlier than Roger Lear and talked to the 2 girls that saw the being, talked to the girl's mother, interviewed him. And I've talked to Danny Sheehan, who's close to the family, and has said that he thinks that he could get us footage. So anyway, what the plan was with Roger Lear and I, when we went to Brazil, we had a really good time down there. The people in Brazil are just wonderful. Was to interview this orthopedic surgeon that had operated on this being. Because a year before, Dr. Roger Lear had gone down there on his own with A.J. Gavard to translate, and he interviewed this orthopedic surgeon. What he said was, A.J. Gavard set up this meeting with the orthopedic surgeon, and this is basically what the orthopedic surgeon told him, is that one early morning, about 2 or 3 o'clock, he was called into the hospital, and he didn't know why, but he came into the hospital operating room, and here was this creature on the operating table with a compound fracture, and we don't know which leg it was, but there was a military group outside. There was military people inside the door, outside the door, and there was this Brazilian general that told the orthopedic surgeon, "Get in there and fix it." And that's what military people would say. Just fix it. And the guy's got a broken leg. Just fix it. So the orthopedic surgeon approached this being and put a splint on it and did whatever he had to do. And there's like a green mist that just filled the room. And in one day, it was totally healed. And the being telepathically told the orthopedic surgeon that in their world, they heal with their mental powers. They don't need intervention by doctors, which I think is fascinating. So when we went down there together, I had to come back early. So Roger, with A.J. Gavard, went to see this orthopedic surgeon again. This time he denied everything. He said it didn't happen because they had gotten to him. So Dr. Roger Lear, one of our many projects, was to, with Jaime Maussan, spirit this orthopedic surgeon and his family out of Brazil to Mexico, and then him have go on camera and tell the real story. Now, it didn't happen, but A.J. Gavard told me 3 or 4 years ago that there's new information, so we need to find out what new things are going on in Brazil and Varginha and all down there. So the point I'm making here, because this is apropos to Dan Burish, he says all the time, I've never met an alien, but I have met an extraterrestrial. What's the difference? Well, my difference, what I can contribute the difference is, an alien is like this creature in Brazil. It's totally alien. There's no genome of humans in there. And whereas an extraterrestrial is a human from our future, which gets into time travel. And Linda Moulton Howe said, wonderful researcher, I just love her to death, at her presentation at Contact in the Desert, July of last year, of 2014, talked about the eternal now. There is no future or past. When someone has a deja vu experience, they're slipping time, both present and past. Art Bell went on his show years ago and said he was living in an apartment with a sliding glass door out to a parking lot, which his car was parked there. So he was sitting there reading or something, and he saw a car crash into his car. Well, he got up, he went out there, opened the door, nothing. About 15 minutes later, a car crashes into his car. So there's a slippage of time there. And Willie Strieber says the same thing, that he was driving with his son, teenager, and his son's friend somewhere on the New Jersey Turnpike or someplace, and they turned off to get some lunch, and they pulled up to this diner and had a wonderful lunch, 3 people, and cost $2.87. And so Willie Strieber said, what's this? So they leave and go where then way back, well, let's stop at that diner. So they stop at the diner, there's no diner there. And they asked one old coot there in the gas station, well, we came through here a week ago and there's a diner. He said, oh, that burned down 40 years ago. So, and people that are watching this probably have had that experience in their life where there's a slippage, either forward or backward, because we're interdimensional beings. We have a soul that's eternal, and that we can tap into that soul force on a regular basis. That's what you do in dreams. You're activating all of that. So the part that I'm emphasizing here in this last part of this is that as far as I know, people in ufology, except for Jim Mars get into the German connection, the Fourth Reich. And that's a major reason for the cover-up, is that Operation Paperclip, when all of those German scientists came here, they came with all their Gestapo. And on my camera, Bill Uhouse says that when you are in the Black Ops world, you have your own personal handler. Dan Burish has it. Dan Burish is this big, heavy-set guy called Little John. That's his handler. So when you're in the black world, you have a handler. He's with you your whole life. He knows everything about you. He knows your family, he knows your illnesses, he knows your weaknesses, your strengths. And every so often you have to take a lie detector test. They monitor you all the time. That's why these people don't come forward. And sometimes, bad things happen. So that's the level of secrecy that you're subjected to if you rise to these levels. So when McConnell was talking to Dr. Dan Burish, basically as his godfather, he looks after him. All these other microbiologists are dead, but Dan Burish will be 52 February the 2nd of this year. So McConnell asked Dr. Dan Burish to become number 9 on Majestic. Well, Burish was reluctant, but he said, well, okay, this is in early 2005. So they had a meeting, and that's the same time frame that I got that email that I just gave to you gentlemen. So Dan Burish suggested in April of 2005 that there be a vote for or against disclosure. And the vote in April of 2005 was 6-5 for disclosure. In September of 2005, it was 8-3 for disclosure. Now, I don't know who's for and who's against, but that vote was taken. And when those votes are taken, they're never reversed. So the next logical question, if in 2005, why isn't it revealed? I don't know for sure. My opinion is that, and my information is that there's a time frame, there's different time frames. And the ET people, at least this main group, the J-Rod type people, the Greys as we call them, numbers are everything. So that's why Dr. Dan Burish was 9, because 9 is 333, and that's the whole significance. So why they haven't revealed it, Dan told me that years ago that it was 15, 16, and 17 were the critical years. And it may be happening as we speak. I just heard on the news the other day that Hillary Clinton is hiring John Podesta as her transition person, which he was a transition person for Obama. And Podesta has said to the National Press Club that the extraterrestrials are here, it's a part of the law, we should present it. Now that's pretty significant, that a potential Democratic nominee for the President of the United States, and she knows a lot about this subject. She was given a lot of information from Rockefeller and Kissinger. You tied Kissinger back into the Rockefeller initiative. And so I've held this information back. I haven't told anybody till here the last part of my life. I don't know how long I got, but the best, whatever I got, I'm going to try and get this information out. The 30 years that I spent on it were very valuable. I'm very pleased and honored to the people from the inside the secret government have been able to get this information to me. They knew that I was an honorable person, that I would disclose certain things, hold other things back. Dan Burrish had to be in a TES, totally encapsulated suit, because we didn't want to contaminate them or vice versa. So Dan Burrish, he goes into great detail in my videos, is that when he comes to work at Area 51 S4, he has to strip down to the nude and be weighed and make sure that he hasn't hidden something in some orifice of his body. And you're weighed when you leave. And when you're at your workstation, you're being weighed. So I talked to John Lear about this, and he said that I asked John if Bob Lazar was weighed, and he said no. That when Bob Lazar was at Area 51 S4, he took a little tiny camera, took it in there, and put it in the stanchion of a chair. And he could take a picture and bring it out. And then when he was people don't know, Bob Lazar was never fired. He just left because he was afraid that he went back out there, he'd never come back. He'd be his bones in the desert. But so they found the camera. This is John Lear talking. And the camera was what decided from then on, Dan Burrish, everybody else had to be weighed in the nude. And so they have to go that protocol all the time, every time they go there. And Dan at one point was going there a couple times a week. And just another aside, I like this part of the story, is that Dan Burrish, microbiologist, specially trained at State University of New York at Stony Brook, and he was trained specifically to work with the J-Rod. And Edward Teller paid for his education at State University of New York. And on my site, my other site, what I'm calling my academic site, area51jrod.com, I have all the documents. Originally, I had 95 documents. I cut it down to 45 now, and it was just too much. But you can download all those documents. It's PhD. The PhD from State University at Stony Brook has been erased. But we have another one, a substitute one that's up there. I have letters from the dean where he's on the honor list, straight A. He got one B, B plus or something in Spanish. But he's a very intelligent person. And he thinks in terms of fractals. I introduced him to J.J. Hurtak, and who wrote the book Keys of Enoch. And it's all about these other dimensions and the fractal images. So he's a pretty good artist, and his wife is pretty good too. So they have given me a lot of information because, you know, back 5, 6, 7 years ago, I was the designated hitter for this information getting to the general public. And wherever you want to go from there.
Well, Bob was, I think, asking the question, I've got a question, but Bob was asking the question, how much influence do the extraterrestrials have on the current state of affairs on the planet, such as the New World Order and where that's all headed? But before you answer, I had a question. I've had a number of people tell me that they've been to Area 51, and every one of them, without exception, has said there are no aliens there, or at least they didn't meet an alien there. I'm assuming that is because the ETs are actually at S4, which is not really Area 51. It's
That's right, yeah.
to the south.
Exactly right, yeah. Yeah, as far as the New World Order, I don't know, you know, and I always say either I know or I don't know. I try and stay away from the word belief. That's a toxic word to me, because belief implies religion, or, you know, either you know or you don't know, or it's a maybe. So all of the New World Order has to do with what we were discussing a few minutes ago about timelines, and that if certain things happen, it changes the timeline. So when Dr. Dan Burrish changes the genome of an extraterrestrial, this changes their whole culture. And just an aside, I love this little vignette about Dan interacting with the J-Rod. Now, he interacted with the J-Rod for 2 years, 94, 95, and some maybe of 96. He's a being from another star system, but they consider themselves friends. So what do friends do? What do you do when you're talking to your friend? You start talking about your childhood or where you came from and so forth. So the J-Rod asked Dr. Dan Burish, what happened in your childhood? What was it like, So Dan Burish started reflecting on his childhood and watching cartoons. So he starts telling him about Cecil and the sea serpent. And that was the cartoon that he watched and that he liked. I'm coming, Beanie Boy, I'm coming, Beanie Boy. So people in this room are old enough to remember it. People watching probably wouldn't. But from then on, the J-Rod, as sort of a joke, called Dan Burish B&E. He didn't call him Beanie. B&E, he separated his syllables. B&E. He said B&E this, B&E that. So the J-Rod's asking him, B&E, what other images the child had? And so Dr. Burish says, well, one of my favorite times as a child was going to Yosemite Park and the waterfalls and the beautiful trees and everything. So he's imaging this in his mind. The J-Rod's reading it. Everything is telepathic with that being. So the J-Rod just let out a sigh. Oh, it's wonderful. The water, the green. And on his planet, it's very dry and it's hot. They have 2 suns. And that's why, in my opinion, they have the double eyelids, because they have to filter out the heavy sunlight. So one of the reasons they like to come here, it's a nice vacation. We got all this water and dim sunlight and things, and their relatives that from their past, what we consider our future. So if they're here and they're interacting, and this gets into depth what you just asked, Bob, which is, this is something that in-depth researchers don't get, is that how many different races, several hundred on planet Earth? Well, how many different races are there in the solar system? Right. And they don't all get along. We all lump them together, like in Independence Day, oh, come down, save us, Jesus, and all that. No. The Nordics are really good, and some group of Nordics Hitler hooked into. At some point, they cut Hitler loose, for whatever reason down the, whatever. That's another whole discussion about South America and Antarctica, and we get back into that, which we can do. But from my research, I don't know, Bob, and yours, there's, I think, actually more sightings in South America than in North America. I don't know. But A.J. Gavard, we have on Coast to Coast, and Peter Davenport said there's like 5,000 a month or something. Well, if there's more in South America, and there's a difference in the abductions, which I've never quite figured out. I've wanted to ask A.J. Gavard that, is that the people in South America seem to be more reluctant at abduction. They hold on to trees and branches and as they're taken aboard the ship. And I might as well throw this in here right now. I don't remember being abducted myself, but when I was a teenager, I had some serious nosebleeds. And I broke my nose playing football, so there's something going on in my nose that I don't know about. But in 1995 or 96, when John Mack's book came out, I was with a group of abductees out in Thousand Oaks with Roger Lear and some other people. And on the way home, I was on the freeway on the 101, and then about 2 hours, it was like 2 in the morning when I noticed the time, then about 3:30, I was on the 10 freeway, coming from Santa Monica. Now there's a on-ramp from the 101 into the 10, but that means I would have had to get off the off-ramp, get back on the freeway to come back. So that's missing time that I have. Now I've never been regressed, so I don't know about, the details of that. I never felt the need to that. And I often say to people, they say, well, should I be regressed? And I say, well, if nothing's bothering you, it's not a good idea to wake sleeping dogs. Just my opinion. But if something's bothering you, yeah, if there's some trauma, but I wouldn't do it unless there's some real reason for it. But A.J. Gavard and the other researchers in South America talk about the natives and the people being, taken aboard, really fighting it big time. So that may be one group of ETs that have infiltrated the German contingent in South America. And that's a whole other thing that should be researched with A.J. Gavard, because if Operation Paperclip and we brought all these Gestapo intelligence, Nazi intelligence people, they just fit right into the CIA. And the Gestapo would be so happy with having everything revealed and the populace. They know whatever, they know we're sitting here and doing this. They know everything. My phone, I'm sure, is tapped. I just figure that it is. Linda Howe, everybody says. But that leads me to just question that maybe these intelligence groups are trying to hear what one group of ET is talking to another group of ET about. There's some, and there's some database someplace where these different intelligence groups are feeding information about which group is doing what and how that changes a timeline. Now, I think, this is just my speculation, that the way New World Order and all of this esoteric things works, you have to be at perpetual war. The only way you can hide these budgets is if you're at war. So we've been in perpetual war. We lost in Korea, we lost in Vietnam, we lost in Afghanistan, we lost in Iraq. Someplace, somebody's got to get it that we can't control the world with our military. We're not the international police force. But they have to have it. The cabal, which is what, like 5 corporations control all the money. So they've got to be having the war so they can hide money and launder it through different sources and all of that. And so I think that the revelation has to come, I say this to people, I don't know for sure, it has to come for the grassroots. Well, you can't get more grassroots than Ron Garner sitting here in January of 2015 with 3 people trying to figure all this out. This is as grassroots as it gets. And I think that this information, if it's disseminated in a way that other in-depth researchers, now I'm sure there's people like Ron Garner out there that have not gone public very much. I've only given a couple of talks here and there, at Rachel, Nevada a few times and so forth. But I've interviewed John Lear in great depth. I really know a lot about Bob Lazar. Now, Corso said that we are at war with aliens. And that's chapter 17 of his book, The Day After Roswell. He lays it out. But he says that they're clones. And how do you know that they're a clone? Well, I tell people, ask them to show you their belly button. If they don't have a belly button, then they got to be a clone. And that's what the images from alien autopsy are, is a being with a pop belly and no belly button and no genitals, or not that they showed anyway, which brings up this issue of the black ops and the controversy over alien autopsy film. The big issue on and off when it first came, was it true or not true? That's the way humans think. It's black or it's white. There's no in between. But everything with this group of intelligence people is in between. That's what they do. And there's this term called a meme. You need to look that up. A meme is an idea that's put out there, and that becomes a part of the genre. And the meme of this autopsy was that there was an autopsy. And I have an autopsy that Dan Burry saw, and Anonymous saw, and most people don't know, but Bob Lazar saw. So this meme, one of the important parts of it is that in the alien autopsy showed there was 2 eyelids. Now, Philip Corso, in his interview, said that the autopsy film that he saw at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, that the Army showed him, showed that the that there were 2 eyelids. And at that time, nobody knew about 2 eyelids. So the Black Ops, in my opinion, show this film of a being with 2 eyelids. That's putting it out there. And Corso says in his book and on camera that eyelid is a light gathering. That's what the night vision came from. The night vision was the eyelid that gathers light, so the ET people can see in the dark. So Corso said that his boss sent him to, I forgot which company right now, but they were working on night vision, but it was as big as a tank or a hauler or something. And so Corso went there with an envelope. He said, sometimes I'm Scrooge. This time I'm Santa Claus. Because here's $60 million. That's the good news. The bad news is that you have to build this night vision goggles. That's what the money's for. The bad news, you got to do it in 12 months because our soldiers need it in Vietnam. So the technology that they got from the ET people saved lives of lots of soldiers in Vietnam. In the same way with the computer chip. They don't say this is from an alien ship. They just say it's from an Italian helicopter. It's from a Russian MiG or whatever, you know. And so my take is that Corso got a bad rap, all because of Hollywood. And he just didn't get his story out there. Now, I've been talking to Philip Corso Jr. People don't know it, but Philip Corso wrote a book called The Day After Dallas. Now, what does that mean? That means that Corso was in the White House at the same time that Anonymous was in the White House, the late 50s, early 60s. They probably passed in the hall at some point. Anonymous says that that he thinks he saw Corso's boss one time in the White House, but didn't know for sure. What's Trudeau? Trudeau.
I had 2 questions. One, are we putting McConnell in any jeopardy by talking about him on this video?
Oh, he probably has more bodyguards than anybody, than the president. But just an aside there, with McConnell, when I was hiring these private investigators to go after Kissinger and these other people, and I mentioned McConnell, he said, "Are you crazy? I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. This is the director of all the spooks in the world. Give me a break. I wouldn't do it for $100 million. No, the private investigator that I hired to check out some of the members of Majestic, where they live, what they do, what's going on. He gave me some information, but...
Do you know anything about John Alexander?
Yeah, he's a criminal, in my opinion.
Why's that?
Because he's a disinformation specialist. He's come around a little bit in later years, but he says there's no cover-up and blah, blah, blah. And there was one at the International Congress a few years ago, some speaker didn't show up, so Bob Brown put him in there, Alexander in there. And people booed him off the stage. The guy is this total disinformation. He's modified a little bit. But then Bob Brown went up and told him, you'll never be invited to hear again. What you have to set up there is total baloney.
Earlier, you were talking about the idea that J-Rod said that he was happy he was here because it was so hot on his planet where there were two suns. Does that in any way relate to the story about Project Serpo?
I think it does, but I don't know how. I didn't buy the Serpo story originally. Dan Burrish didn't buy it. But now that I studied a little bit more, I think there's something to it. Just what and how, I can discuss that a little bit if you want. Serpo was fascinating.
But the question is, did any of your whistleblowers have Serpo-related evidence?
Just tangentially, not directly, except for Dan Burrish. Dan Burrish was working with this J-Rod in the mid-90s. And toward the end of 96, normally when Dan Burrish would go into the clean sphere, he had to take one step forward, feet together. One step forward, feet together, like in a wedding ceremony. That was respect for this ambassador, in quotes, from another star system. So, and the protocol was never turn your back on this person. So he, late in their relationship, would approach the J-Rod, and the J-Rod, as a joke, because J-Rod had a great sense of humor. They were joking around a lot. And the J-Rod, as a joke, made a step toward him for the first time. First time in 2 years. Well, this frightened Dan so much, he caught his heel on the grated floor and fell backwards on his filter pack because he had a totally encapsulated suit and it was filtered through the back. So the J-Rod then, he didn't jump, he was sick. He sort of loped over. I mean, they had to clean him up. He was drooling and vomiting. He was a sick person. So J-Rod climbed up on Dan's chest and downloaded all his information. People in the Black Ops called Dan Burrish a galactic encyclopedia because the J-Rod had all his information that he downloaded. And Dan Burrish has this eidetic memory, this memory that you can remember everything. You can ask Dan Burrish right now, when he was at Long Beach Hospital learning biology from Dr. Reynolds, what color the wall was in the receptionist's office. He'll tell you. He'll tell you which way the desk faced, right, left. He has this, it's a gift. Just certain people have it, probably Stephen Hawking's and whoever else has, it's an enhancement. And that's when Dan was enhanced, when he was taken on board the ship from Mayberry Park in Lakewood when he was 9 years old. He was enhanced purposely to try and heal this J-Rod. This is why I'm saying that the timelines change if you do certain procedures or the economy does certain things or we go to war certain ways and all that stuff. So Dan Burrish is getting all this information, and Zygmunt Brzezinski was in the observation platform at the time. So at that time, they didn't have anybody suited up in this totally encapsulated suit to get him out of the clean sphere. So it took about a half an hour, and Zygmunt Brzezinski and whatever other group of Majestic watched all this. Asked Zygmunt. And so, and Dan was in a coma for about a day or two after that. When this being from another star system climbed up on his chest, they ramped up the pressure. They could have killed the J-Rod. Now this is a being from another star system. They're going to protect their guy, screw the other guy. Dan is saying, no, no, no. He had two means of communication. One was to the scientists who are doing all this research, and one is to security. So when he's saying no, 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 he's saying no, no, no to them not to ramp up the pressure to harm this being. They thought he was saying no, no, no stay away from me, J-Rod, because, and so there was a little confusion there. I had to get that straightened out. And he told them, you know, but this is another explanation of that. When Dr. Dan Burrish goes in to meet the J-Rod, he has to go through all these protocols of washing him with all these special liquids and all that stuff so he can't contaminate. So he has to go through this hallway or whatever, however they have it set up. And the protocol is you never turn back. Once you start down that gantry, you don't turn back. But just so happened one time, Admiral McConnell was there in his civvies and saw Dan, and Dan in his suit turned around and gave him a big hug. From that time on, Dan was a star. Everybody said, this is McConnell's guy. He's younger in age and seniority, but the main guy's hugging this guy, you know, in the decontamination chamber. So from then on, Dan was king of the realm. Whatever you wanted, you know, you're the main guy.
So Ron, you said that Dan Burrish was abducted at the age of 9 for the purpose of
Enhancement for the future, for
a
things.
little later when he would meet J-Rod.
Right, like 27 years later.
To help J-Rod get well.
Right, that's right.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that's...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so the second question I have is, you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation that J-Rod had said to Dan, we don't put splints on things, or we don't heal
No,
ourselves.
this is the being in Varginha. That's a different...
Oh, a different being.
That's a creature in Varginha.
Okay. We use our
no.
mind to heal ourselves.
Yeah, that's in Brazil. That had nothing to do with J-Rod.
Okay, but J-Rod obviously didn't have the ability to heal himself by his mind, or however the other being.
No, obviously not, because they were trying to heal him.
Right.
And but part of that power of the mind addresses what the Black Ops want Dr. Dan Burrish, microbiologist, Department of Defense, want him to do, which is to translate what the J-Rod says into English. So each time he would spend with the J-Rod, they would debrief him. But he only told them about 20%. But the Black Ops didn't pursue it too much. You know, they didn't want to irritate Dan, and you know, by asking too many questions. But this leads us to the big finale, which is that because of this looking glass device, they can turn it into a Stargate. There is a Stargate in Abydos, Egypt right now. There's a certain part of it, I have it diagrammed. And so the Black Ops was going to open this Stargate in December 2003. And so they needed to have Dan Burrish there so that, and with the J-Rod. So there'd be Dan Burrish and the J-Rod in the desert of Abydos, Egypt, when they opened this Stargate. Because they wanted to communicate, not like in the movie Stargate, but they wanted to communicate with these people that were going to arrive, possibly from Serpo. You're talking about Serpo. That's what makes me think maybe Serpo's real. So they had Dan Burrish there, and when they moved the J-Rod from one place to another, this clean sphere, I mean, what they had to do to get that in there originally is amazing. So they developed what I call a scooter with a dome over the top, like a Pope mobile kind of thing, you know. And they had this atmosphere in there because they had the J-Rod in there, and they're approaching this, what looked like from 100 yards, like a mud wall. And the plan is that whatever came through this interdimensional portal to the J-Rod, to Dan Burrish, that's why I say the esoteric part of this is never addressed and ufology, because it's beyond their pay grade. They don't. I've studied esoteric things all my life. So what happened was, the J-Rod in his mind is appealing to Dr. Dan Burrish. Help me, B&E, help me. I want to go home. He missed his wife and his child, just like we would. He wanted to get back to Zeta Reticuli. He's been here for over 50 years in this so-called ambassadorial suite. So Dan's saying, I can't do that, I don't. But then Dan just said, screw it. So he hit that controller and forced that scooter, whatever we call it, into the wall. J-Rod disappears, the scooter bounces back, Dan Burrish bounces back, and with no clothes on, the strip, and all of the Navy SEALs black with automatic weapons, and McConnell's there, don't shoot, that's Dan, because he was thrown back onto the, whatever they have there, cement, something or other. So they had to medevac him out or to an aircraft carrier out there after that experience. So what's the implication, the inference? We need to have a whole section on inference and implications of all this, is that they have this interdimensional connection, either with physical things like a mud wall and but it has to be like in a place like Abydos, Egypt. People know Egypt as being a spiritual, in quotes, place, but it's much more than that. It's I mean, all of Egypt, and you get into ancient aliens. And Dan Burrish is a genius at reading graphics and fractals and everything. He is deciphering right now. He has 500 individual diaries of UFO beings' writings, their writings. I think, I don't have it with me, but I have a sample.
Where did he get those from?
From the J-Rod, when he downloaded all this information. Then he wrote it all out, and that's part of his research.
So Ron, I had a question. We're hearing a lot these days about jumping. More Eisenhower and different people coming out and saying that they've been to Mars. So they go into a jump room and they jump. Was any of that ever discussed with any of the witnesses you met?
No, just that Dan Burrish doesn't believe Serpo was true. But I don't think Dan knew too much about Serpo at the time.
Well, one of the most exciting things that I've learned today is that Edward Teller had personal interactions with aliens about technology.
Oh yeah, Bill Uhouse, I have it on camera. And Teller was at the head of the conference table in Los Alamos. And there were two beings there. And
They were
Nordics. And Dan Burrish was at some meeting, not with Edward Teller. But if you go on my site, Alien Disclosure at Area 51, go to the appendix, and you will see a document, 3.5-page document, written by McConnell. Stanton Friedman wants signatures and watermarks. I mean, that brings up, I don't do that. Bob does that. I love you, man. But that's not my shtick. I'm not going to go there. I take the people around that hand me something, they know what they're talking about. So in this letter, it explains why Dan Burrish was chosen, why Bob Lazar was chosen, and the background of all of this. This is my McConnell himself. So if somebody will download it or get the book, or the Kindle book, or you can download it from area51jrod.com, all of those documents are downloadable. So you can, it takes a while to do it, but for the in-depth researchers, which I'm hoping MUFON will flush them out of the woodwork, people like me that have been behind the scene, that will expand these bits of information.
Well, over the years, you've been giving or lending us hard copies of some of these documents.
Right.
Are those basically the same things that are on
Right.
the websites now?
Yeah, right. Some of the same thing. So that, because in this field, Corso says it. They don't have to cover up anything. Ufologists will cover up by fighting among themselves. That just goes with the territory. The people are people, and they want their book, their video, their shtick on it, But they're people, God bless them, Jim Mars and Linda Howe and Richard Dolan and Timothy Good. In fact, I'll just throw this as a good place to put this in there. I often say to people, here in the hospital, people, wow, 30 years, give me the whole thing of UFOs in 2 minutes. I say to them, I'm sorry, but if you haven't read 3 books, I don't want to talk to you. You got to read Day After Roswell, Timothy Good's Above Top Secret, and what was the 3rd book? Behold a Pale Horse. Yeah. Until you read those 3 books, don't talk to me, because you have no background, no context, nothing to contribute.
I do have several questions that I wanted to ask about.
Okay.
First one was, what's the status of the Eagles Disobey screenplay from 2004? Is that just...
I wrote a treatment on it, but it never went anywhere.
Okay.
I gave it to the screenwriter people, and it's in limbo now.
Right. Have you been personally threatened by people who do not want to see your whistleblower information released?
I've been visited by Homeland Security.
Okay, really?
And in a nice sort of way.
They identified themselves, sort of?
Yeah.
Okay. So it wasn't a covert?
No, they identified themselves and said, well, certain things shouldn't be talked about. It'd be a good idea.
Yeah.
But,
The covert visits are the bad ones.
Yeah.
Have you signed any contracts with individuals or entities that would control the publication or release of what we're talking about?
Well, no, nothing. On the anonymous story, I have total control of, I have a 13-page legal document that says that Ron Garner, Stargate Productions, has total control of everything, the videos, audios, everything. And that was signed in February of 2013.
So you got copyrights under Stargate?
Right, everything, yeah. And Daniel Sheehan, I just talked to him yesterday, went back and met with Anonymous in July of last year, where he verified everything I just said. Now, this leads to what I was saying earlier, that Majestic, there's the 12, sure, but there's all kinds of subordinates all over in academia, in the media, everywhere. They got them, and there's some kind of mind control. That's another discussion that you can have. And that, I'll just name them. So I'm not holding back. That's the thing I plan to tell people. Dan Burry still has security oaths. Ron Garner doesn't have security oaths. So I can tell you what's going on. So the mathematician at Caltech, his last name is Houneman, Hounman. He's Majestic. So when Majestic people saw the future, they saw in a future publication of Caltech, could be 50 years, I don't know, 100, who knows, in the future, something about the Ganesh particle. What's the Ganesh particle? So they decided to have Dr. Dan Burrish, microbiologist, Department of Defense, find out about the Ganesh particle. Or they already knew that he knew about it, but go in depth. So Houneman set it up, and George, he's a math. What is a math? Because that's what they do. They have overlapping technologies, and everything in the world is based on math, in the universe, in Zeta Reticuli. Everything is math, and someday we'll get there. So Houneman set it up for Dan Burrish and his assistant then, his wife now, Marcia, to give this presentation at Caltech, April 2008. I was the cameraman. I have a video. I'll give it to you. And where he explains about the Ganesh particle. And he named it Ganesh because of the Hindu god Ganesh, the elephant god, which is a breaker of obstacles. So he explains this Ganesh particle. And this Ganesh particle heals anything it touches. It's a special kind of quartz crystal, and it sends out a little thing, and then it touches another cell, and that cell is healed. So in this presentation at Caltech, it's way beyond my pay grade and probably beyond Bob's. But at some point, we should show that to some microbiologists and people that are familiar with the field and analyze it. Is it baloney? Is it whatever? And I'll tell you the story, how he found it out. It's a fascinating story. They use remote viewers. So in 2001, the Black Ops people, I know who some of them were doing remote viewing. And they came up, the remote viewers, that there was something on Frenchman's Mountains, about 10 miles from downtown Las Vegas, that was really important. So Dan goes up there in 2001, and he's just looking around, curiosity, and I've been there myself. It's in one of my videos. In fact, it's in the Caltech video. I show what's going on there. And this being just sort of appears out of the royal, like an Indian shaman guy. Where did you come from? And the Indian says, well, if you shine a light on that rock, it'll catch fire. Dan says, oh, really? And the guy just sort of wanders off or whatever. So Dan goes back home, he gets a laser, he shines it on the rock, it catches fire. Now this guy's 199 IQ, curiosity off the charts. He wants, how can that happen? How can a laser on this rock? So he began to analyze microbiology, the rock, the special crystal, quartz crystal. What does it mean? How does it work? And what he discovered was that this is an ancient, and this is what they're, this is just my opinion, Dan's not saying this, but this is the what they're trying to do in Switzerland with the God particle for billions of dollars. Dan did it for a few thousand. You know, the Hydron computer.
People want to understand what CERN is. If they would just indulge me for a little bit, they'll have a clear understanding of why they're doing it, what they're looking for, and what is the potential and the facts that will come out of these experiments. CERN, and amazingly, it won't come from the scientific community or anybody who has knowledge of physics. They will not tear it apart because they understand what I'm saying. So I'm gonna make this as basic as possible. I want you all to imagine, if you want to know what CERN is doing, I want you to imagine you come into a world and you find architecture all over the place, buildings and homes and houses, and you think they're beautiful and it's really a big discovery. You find out with the houses, you can house people. You can do many things with a house, with a structure. All of a sudden, after many years, you become curious and you say, what's holding all this together? And you begin to find not nails that you can take out, but glue that has bonded itself to the materials. And you become interested in that glue that's holding the structure together. And so you're fascinated by this glue, and you've tried everything to replicate it. You can't because it's hardened. Glue is hardened. You come to the realization the only way to find out how this glue is working is to break it down to its basic particles. And you have to have that glue in its former state, not the state after it's already hardened. Right? So you don't want it in the cured state, the state that you can see. You want it in its initial state, which is a liquid state, before it hardens. And so CERN, basically, is a device that will allow them to examine particles in their initial state, not after everything is bonded together. That's a very simple way to look at what CERN is doing. They're trying to find the glue that holds everything together. Is what they're doing. That's the purpose of CERN. Now, what has come out of CERN is called antimatter, which was first actually produced. It was first produced in 1955, and CERN is a very old organization, but it was produced in 1955, and they found positrons, which are anti-electrons. To understand what antimatter is, I'm going to have to explain the very, very basics of what matter is. And believe me, it's going to get very weird here shortly, because you're going to begin to see exactly what they're doing. But you have to understand what you're looking at now. The matter and antimatter are in fact opposites. Now, the matter that we have in front of us, if you take a piece of wood, nothing happens. It's just a piece of wood. But if you set that wood on fire, you have caused a reaction. And then it's in a dangerous potential state. It's active. If you have a battery outside of your cell phone, it does nothing. You put the battery inside the cell phone, the electrons begin to flow. The electrons will flow from one place to another. Essentially, that's what electronics are, the control of electrons. They control the direction, the speed of electrons, which create tiny pulses. They flow or don't flow, flow or don't flow. Those are called gates. Those gates form computers. And with a computer, we can do fascinating things. This is why they did, in fact, take Nikola Tesla's findings, because he discovered some things with electrons and protons that were very fascinating. Electricity within itself is a visual observation of electrons and protons in their active state, non-controlled state. Antimatter is the opposite of the matter that we can control. Antimatter cannot be controlled. In fact, when they first produced antimatter, they had to have a facility to contain it, because unlike the wood, where you have to have a reaction to cause it to burn, antimatter, you have to have a containment to cause it not to burn. That's the only way they can store it, with massive facilities to store it. Let me give you an example. In a nuclear bomb, it takes timing, which takes electronics, and the explosions have to be just right to cause a reaction. As a nuclear bomb, like the Hiroshima bomb, which takes pounds of nuclear material to cause it to react. And it has to be very precise. Well, let's go the opposite. Let's say we had antimatter, correct? If we had 1 gram of antimatter, that would equal about 42 or 40, let's just say 45 kilotons of TNT, which is about 4 Hiroshima bombs. And it's already inherently unstable. It's unstable. The only way to harness antimatter is to contain it. And it takes very large and expensive facilities to contain just 1 gram of antimatter. Some have failed, some have not. If those containment devices fail, they cause mega quakes. That's what happens when they fail. Now we're talking small, tiny drops of antimatter. I mean, just drops of raw antimatter. It's highly unstable. It has to be isolated from the rest of reality when it's contained in a literal sense. Now, given that this can be weaponized, which is true, there are other implications that the average person has not thought about. Our body is held together by that glue that they're searching for, that bonds matter together. Those who understand what's called the standard model, they have a pretty good idea of what would happen if the force table in the standard model is just an explanation of how all things work. You're dealing with matter and force, and they have categorized the elements of matter, everything we can touch and feel and observe, in what's called quarks, the building blocks, of protons and nuclei, and leptons, which are essentially, well, that would be like an electron. And then we have force. Force are lumps of energy that transmit the forces that bring matter to life. Like a photon, it carries the electromagnetic force. Without a photon, we couldn't produce motors or anything else. Without gluons, which carry strong force, neutrons and protons would not be held together. In other words, the universe would not exist. And of course, you have your W and Z particles, which are for weak forces that govern radioactivity. So you have this standard model, and they have broken this down, but what they're looking for is a higher explanation of how everything works. This is the particle they're searching for. Now, they found half of it. They already found a component of it. That was the Higgs field. Now, the Higgs field is an explanation of they found the traces of the Higgs field. They can now observe the Higgs field. The Higgs field is what is found wherever matter is not. In your room, the Higgs field is in operation. Listen, with the Higgs field, they can begin to alter reality as we know it. Now, a lot of people they can't capture that right away. But you have to remember our world is made up of matter. The antimatter is what we can't see, what we can't touch, what we can't feel, though we interact with it every day. A lot of people like to think of antimatter as the other dimension, which is the opposite of this dimension. It's an inconceivable place that is hostile inherently. It's not under control. It's very hostile. This dimension would be the more tamed dimension. Here's what they've done since the 1930s. Well, actually, since the 1800s. There was a group that studied nothing but the phenomena of paranormal activity, not like you've seen on TV, not like you've seen in Hollywood, not like anyone knows about. But they studied the science behind paranormal activity and have then defined that this is called a dimensional slit, where things can obviously interact with this world all the time. And they were wondering the interactions between known matter and that type of matter. But they also found with antimatter, this antimatter can be absorbed by any realm of paranormal activity. It is, in effect, neutralized and absorbed. So there's a physical effect to the spiritual world in antimatter. And often, demonic entities and all these other paranormal things are attracted to antimatter. They're attracted to it. For every gram of antimatter that's produced, and then it's bought into this world, when they produce it, it attracts things from another dimension coming here. What is CERN going to do? Is to allow humanity to produce pounds of antimatter. What's happening, that is the unseen portion of dark matter. And of course you have the angels which govern what that realm can and cannot do. It's not it's a shame, and I have to continue to say this, it's a shame that the Christian community cannot believe the Bible when it's talking about things like that, because it's going to cause them to be harmed. What they fail to adopt from the Bible, what they fail to believe, is going to harm them. It's going to harm them. They may not be lost in their spirits, but they're certainly going to have lumps all over the place. It's going to harm them. And I hope people have a general understanding of the matter, which we can touch and feel and observe, and antimatter, which we cannot touch, feel, or observe. However, it's working in tandem with the matter, because everything is balanced. The subject of Lucifer in the spiritual sense, because God gives everything balance. Everything has balance. There is dark, there's light, there's good, there's bad. Everything has balance. I mean, God could have not. Why did he put the serpent in the garden in the first place? For balance. God can't give us an honest choice unless we're faced with an equal balance of obedience and disobedience, good and evil. And so Lucifer is used to be that balance of darkness with the light that we're given. And the reason why I see people are going to be harmed when they don't believe these things is because if they do not believe in the spiritual realm of our Lord, well, then they're giving the spirits authority to work in their lives. CERN has yielded so many results and gave a true definition of paranormal activity. It's beyond me that a lot of people cannot get this through the truth of the word. They can't. Antimatter is being pulled out of nowhere, out of this other dimension, which is nowhere but everywhere. In consequence to that, they found out antimatter has a specific type of energy signature that they can, in fact, detect. This is how it's part of the process of pulling it out. Well, as it comes to find out, some of the not-so-good consequences of this process has to do with the human psyche. Stephen Hawking, he understands the implications of what could happen. He understands how it can affect the psyche. For a long time, Stephen Hawking did not believe there was a God. For a long time, he didn't. But you see, something is changing with him. He is beginning to see that everything is so precise, it's impossible for it to be happenstance. I mean, everything down to a trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a meter is absolutely precise. And he's beginning to change his mind. It's what's happening to him. He's changing his mind. He is now beginning to entertain the idea that what people call divine is in fact done by some sort of architect. They have no concept of it. Now, with the general basis of what CERN is doing, that's the basic idea of what they're doing, and that's exactly what they're doing with particles. Here comes the other part that's not so good. This is why they have to do another set of it. Listen, it's not just one experiment they're about to perform. This thing is going to run 6 months continuously colliding protons near the speed of light to analyze particles, exotic particles that are made at the beginning of the Big Bang. That's why they call it the Big Bang machine. It's the only way to observe these particles, which wink in and out of existence in, a fraction of time. A fraction of time. And the consequence of this search to gather more and more of this matter, by the way, they have a more efficient method of pulling out or gathering antimatter, which is why they need to know the properties of some more properties of this particle they have described. Once they have these properties, they will be able to extract as much antimatter as they desire efficiently. It's right now to obtain antimatter, it's very inefficient. It's very inefficient. In other words, to get a pound of it would take about 10,000 years at the current rate. It's just not going to work. CERN will allow them to do that probably within a week. But here's the consequence. They've observed the energy of both matter and antimatter. They found out that antimatter is intimately tied to every single life form on this planet. They found out that energy signature is the same energy signature in all life on this planet. All life, none excluded. Found out when any life form is in the presence of antimatter, the energy of the life form changes. The energy changes. I'll put this in basic terms. A person has both dark and light already in them. It's part of their makeup. It's what you can't live in a material world without antimatter. Nothing would exist. And so a person has both good energy, which would be this realm, this realm of matter, but they also have energy of antimatter. So they're connected. A person is connected to both realms at the same time on the energy level, and they don't even know it. They don't know it. And they have found, certainly, with all the experiments they have found out why paranormal activity exists. They know exactly what it is. They don't want to tell anybody. This is why they perpetuate foolishness on television. But every single person, every single life form is connected to that realm, that other realm, into this realm of reality all the time. Now, a person's thoughts, how a person feels, and doctors know about this too, how a person feels will determine which energy they draw from. You can draw from this realm, good realm, and you have positive results, and that's called faith. That's why doctors believe in it. That's why they give out placebos. They know that if a person believes something is helping them, they have it within themselves to repair. They can command their bodies to be repaired simply based on belief. And people think they work. And people have recovered from cancer. People have recovered from back injuries. Quadriplegics have been repaired simply by their own faith. This other realm, because that energy is contained in another dimension, so to speak. That's the containment wall. But when a person draws that energy in, it is the opposite of this realm. In this realm, again, we have to light a piece of wood with a flame to catch it on fire. In that realm, it's already on fire. You have to contain it to see the wood because it's engulfed in flames. It's the opposite of this realm. When a person changes their emotional state, their energy changes, and they begin to draw their energy from this other dimension, this chaotic and violent and uncontainable place where they draw dark matter from, intimately linked. And it's in operation all the time. Now, the scientists, they are aware of this. Now, here's the other part that's not so comforting. On the spring equinox, the forces change on the Earth, and they know this. They know that forces do change, which will in fact allow them to have better results. And believe me, it's timed perfectly. It is timed perfectly. With the basic introduction of what CERN is doing and what it is, and the dark matter and matter itself, now we get into the heart of the matter, of what's actually, there will be consequences. It's just that there have been consequences before. Nobody took notice, and the energy signature of dark matter, which, by the way, resides everywhere. But once you bring it into this realm, where we can actually see it and observe it, it attracts things from the other realm. Dark matter is tied to dark matter. Everything has a connection. Everything has a connection. That connection can never be broken by anything. If they bring dark matter into this realm, it's still connected to that realm where the dark matter came from. No matter how far away they put it anywhere, it's still connected. Because that realm is everywhere and it's still connected. Because it's connected, it effectively increases paranormal activity around where it's contained. And this is why they shift facilities of where they once kept dark matter in a college. I won't name it for the sake of the college, but the university. They had to move it to a deep underground facility because of what was happening to the people in the college. People began to have vivid dreams, nightmares. The violence began to erupt and vile things began to happen in those places. And it's because it's a chaotic piece of matter. It is just chaotic. And it's very difficult to contain something that is so powerfully chaotic. This is what an explosion is, by the way. When an atom bomb explodes, it releases chaos. Chaos in the form of chemicals, reactions, and everything is out of order. An explosion is the absence of order. That's what an explosion is. When you contain something, you're giving it order. So it's controlled. Here's the worst part. Understanding that dark matter is always connected to its source, which is that realm where the dark matter came from, the realm that's all around us. Just imagine that dark matter being the ocean, right? Imagine this realm being the submarine. We're all in the submarine having fun, and we're doing our thing, and we have disagreements here, disagreements there. And then we find out there's a hole in the sub. But the hole is not, we thought the hole was in the sub, but it wasn't in the submarine itself. It was, in fact, in the people. The people's water inside their bodies began to increase based on their emotions. Let's just say that. And the dark matter can then come into this realm through people. That's, in fact, what they discovered in 1950. That people can also produce dark matter by way of, it's very minute, it's very tiny, but it's measurable, it's quantifiable. In fact, they now know how much energy a person has to have before they go absolutely berserk. They also know how much of that energy signature a person must have before an entity from that realm can possess them, which also allowed them to understand that not everybody can be possessed. Not everybody can be, the person has to be prepared. To be possessed, they have to be, in essence, they have to be a portal themselves to be possessed. Not everybody can be possessed. And so, not to get way off target, but this dark matter is everywhere. That you know what, all these things, here's what, I mean, it really gets to me, is that these scientists, over the course of many years, have quantified or they have calculated these things. They have extracted the truth, the facts, yet the Christians don't believe it. And these crooked people in certain places have already been harnessing this power for themselves, and it's been effective every single step of the way. Yet the Christian community, for some reason, has a mental block on certain things of God, as though they have all the time in the world. You know, I will say this, and then I'll get back to CERN, that if a person trusts their father, they don't need the father to explain everything. They just need to know that the father said it, and they'll go do it. If you tell a child, you need to go rake the yard, a child's not going to sit there and say, well, what brings you to that conclusion? A child's not going to do that. You'll just go out there and rake the yard. Over time, you'll find out why, but you have already performed what the Father said. But in the Christian community, we have to know why everything is before we do anything. In the scientific community, they see the facts. They know they don't understand it fully, and so they have experiments, and they learn along the way. In fact, they're obedient to their own disciplines, and we're not obedient to our own disciplines. So the problems about CERN, I know everybody's waiting on this. What could potentially happen from this? Well, they had another discovery that dark matter causes other pieces of dark matter that they have contained to react. In other words, if you have a container, say you had a teaspoon of dark matter, and let's just say you had it in Pennsylvania, and somebody else had that same a teaspoon of dark matter in California, then as soon as the teaspoon of dark matter is exposed to the elements in Pennsylvania, it causes the dark matter in California to begin to activate. In other words, you lose containment in one place, containment in another place is going to be lost. It's going to be lost. So they're intimately tied together. Now, we've covered the fact that people have the signatures of the energy of dark matter in them and matter. So they contain both matter and antimatter, in a sense, the signature of energy. They're not put together. It's just that signature. And we draw upon those based upon our thoughts and what's in our minds and what's in our hearts, in a sense. With CERN, as they begin to collide these protons, dark matter is going to be produced in great numbers. I mean, in greater and greater numbers. Not only the matter, but the energy signature. It's going to also be released into this realm. You know what that's going to cause? It's going to cause the dark energy signature within people to begin to activate more and more. You see, it's going to become difficult for people to stay contained or controlled. In essence, they're going to become violent. They're going to have vivid dreams. The darkness within a person is absolutely going to begin to surface. And this is not theoretical. This is not some theory somebody thought of. This is absolutely 100% quantifiable, and it's happened before. It's going to happen in greater numbers this time. It will take effect. That's also been weaponized. Nobody knows this, and I probably won't be in trouble for this, but they have a weapon concerning dark matter that they can put within a country or a specific place to cause chaos. It's a weapon. They've used it before. They can unleash this, and it can cause chaos anywhere they want chaos to be rampant. Also, there's something very important about that. I know this firsthand. There are often times you have to partake in the weapons development program, and you become a rat, so to speak, in a maze, to see firsthand what the effects are going to be. I'll describe something, people can believe it or not, but sooner or later they're going to experience it too. I am a Christian. I know that Jesus died on the cross for the remissions of sins and now sits at the right hand of the Father, soon to be sent to us again. I rely on the blood of the Lamb. I am, as a soldier, I count my Lord and Savior as my commander. And so I am used to taking orders and to operate life or death in those orders that he gave. That's the only thing that saved my life one day. I was thrust into a position where I had to absolutely 100% fight to keep my flesh under full subjection. I could not believe the intensity of what was happening. My thoughts were all over the place. It was almost like every evil thing that was in me came to the surface with a snap of a finger. Irritation, aggravation, anxiety, fear, just anger, hatred, all sorts of things in the snap of a finger. The only thing that kept me still, the challenge was to be still. The only thing that kept me still, I had to absolutely 100% focus on the Lord. I had to focus on him. It's the only way to overcome that is to focus on him and place the flesh under subjection. If a person's out there and they say, well, I have no power to control myself. Yes, you do. You don't want to control yourself. Believe me, that power is within you, is given through the Holy Spirit. I felt the power, the protective power, the blood of the Lamb and the Holy Spirit during that test. I was amazed. I didn't know this could be harnessed in that way. I did not know, but it happened. And this was a weapon. This was a mild weapon. And you have to cling, people have to cling to the Word of God and His promises. Most importantly, His instruction. Not one time when I was in that test, I didn't think about His promises. I thought about His love. That's what I thought about. And when I began to think about His love, something happened within me. Everything came under subjection as though it took no effect. That's what happened. They found the force that holds the dark energy or the dark matter away from this realm. They call it the wall. There's another name for that. A name of which that those particles they're going to find, they found part of it. They're going to find the other pieces that are in that wall. And when they find the other pieces to this wall, they will then be able to undo that wall. There's another name for that wall. The veil. Call it the veil. It holds back that realm. They found out what's holding back the dark energy from, because it would be absolutely destructive if the two met. But they found out, now with this as a weapon, there is no counter weapon to this. China is building an LHC facility. They're building a particle accelerator. There are, to present day count, about 14 particle accelerators in existence. 14, not just one. All the countries are vested in the CERN facility. Every single last country. In the United States, we have 3 facilities here. 3. I can't tell you where they are. One they began to build, but they couldn't, but they went ahead and built it anyway. It's in one of the biggest states in the United States, and it's there and it's operational. It's also going to be powered up during this time. I'm saying this because when this thing does power up, the immediate effects are not what I'm worried about. That's not my concern. The psychological effects on people is going to become quite evident. And I know that people will come under some strange attacks, some strange occurrences and incidents. I know that the only way they can be protected from such things is their unqualified belief in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. You can't fake it. There is no substitute. People know if a person is real or not because they emit a different energy. That energy is that wall that this other realm cannot breach. It can't breach it. And it's absolutely going to take effect. The collider, think of a collider as hundreds of nuclear explosions taking place within 1 second, and they're containing it. It goes beyond fusion. It's in a realm by itself when they collide protons. They are going to find these particles, and within months, they're going to put into motion what we talked about today, and people are going to feel these effects. And then this other realm is going to begin to spill over in multiple places, everywhere. Violence will increase. The crucial side of this is that with this show coming up, people are going to realize, all too painfully, what we've talked about today, but they have to start now. They really have to. They can't make excuses for their flesh anymore.
Now, most people will not have any understanding of most of what was presented in this two-part video. First and foremost, you have to come to a knowledge of God. Then you have to come to a knowledge of this world being greatly deceived, and then you have to come to a knowledge of the times that we are in and what's really going on in this world. You see, there's a lot happening. Most people are so distracted in their lives that they simply just don't know. They've got families they're raising. They've got, they're taking their kids to soccer and baseball and dance and, school plays. When you're missing the truth of what's going on in this world, something very big is about to happen. And there are truth tellers and seekers, those that are looking for the truth. They're called watchmen, and they are researching, and they are putting videos up like this and many more, and we're showing you the truth of what's going on in the world so that you can at the very least receive the knowledge and begin to prepare. Because if you are not in Christ, if you have not accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, that's not good, especially for what's coming. If you knew what was coming, if you understood that we are most certainly 100% spiritual beings in these physical bodies, and we are fighting demons and principalities in very high places, if you understood the truth, then you might be able to grasp the consequences. I pray that you guys get right with God. I pray that you put your face to the floor and you accept Jesus Christ. You ask forgiveness for your sins. I'm praying for humanity. I really am praying for you guys. May God bless you. I hope this video pierced your heart.